Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 29th edition of Filmfest Hamburg, live here at the Cinemax, Cinema 3 at Cinemax Hamburg Dammtor. I welcome you all offline here in the cinema and online, of course, on the YouTube live stream to our panel discussion. Of course, everybody expected the art and film historian Anja Ellenberger to host this panel as we have announced it, but unfortunately Anja got ill and had to drop chairing our discussion last minute, so I may jump into this morning. My name is Nils Daniel Peiler and I'm part of the programming, press and public relations team of Kinemathek Hamburg and the Metropolis Kino. I send my warmest wishes to Anja for recovering soon, hopefully, and it is my pleasure to replace her to host this discussion about a Cinemathek of the future this morning. Anja Ellenberger herself, together with film curator Sarah Adam and Martin Aust, being managing director of Kinemathek Hamburg, has recently developed and presented a concept for a so-called Center for Audiovisual Cultures here in Hamburg, short ZAK. The abbreviation is for the German title Zentrum Audiovisueller Kulturen, which also, of course, gave inspiration to the title of today's panel of AUF ZAK. The ZAK is meant to be a new place here in Hamburg and ideally situated in an area of the city where culture hasn't been easily accessible so far for a diverse audience, like for instance the island of Kleiner Grasbrock. The ZAK is meant to deal with various audiovisual art forms and host cinemas, festivals and audiovisual archives. And today we would like to hear about the experience from three prominent international speakers from their respective angles, what should be considered in planning such a cinemathek for the future for Hamburg. We've also prepared a little handout which our assistant Jule will provide to you, so you can have a little closer look into the concept for the ZAK by Anja Ellenberger, Sarah Adam and Martin Aust. It is therefore my great pleasure to introduce our guests to you this morning. We are still waiting via online video channel for Gabo Heindl, architect and urbanist from Vienna, Austria. But I'm very proud to present my two guests here on the stage. To my left, Mila Schlingemann, head of programming from iFilm Museum in Amsterdam from the Netherlands, and to my right, Angela Seidel, being director of the Cinemathek Leipzig here from Germany. My first question this morning would go to Mila Schlingemann. Just the other week, we had the opening of the new Academy Museum for Motion Pictures in Los Angeles, which finally opened its doors after years of planning. And the Italian star architect Renzo Piano provided an emblematic architecture which was often compared to the famous Death Star in the Star Wars films, for example. And speaking of such iconic architecture, Amsterdam opened such an iconic building in Amsterdam's north a decade ago, designed by the Austrian architectural office De Lugan Meisel. Could you please guide us verbally a little towards and through your building? And I would especially be interested how ICE architectural setup shapes your work of programming there.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here at the Film Festival of Hamburg. So it's quite a big question, but I'll try and give an answer to it. So first of all, the building from the outside, I don't know if people have been there. Yes, I see some nodding faces. It looks like, well, sometimes we compare it as a sci-fi bird. It's a very sci-fi looking kind of building. It's completely white, very modern. It's, I think, beautiful architecture. And it has a very, so to say, cinematic feel to it when you come inside. I'm sorry. So when you enter the building, there's this huge space, and it's called EBR. It's an I-Bar restaurant. So it's like the sort of auditorium, so to say, where everyone gathers together. So there's the restaurant and the bar, and then downstairs there is what we called the panorama, and It's our permanent collection where you can see old cameras like mutoscopes, and it's all from our own collection, our own archive. Also there's a 360 exhibition. It's a compilation on thematicals, on different themes of also from collection material that you can browse through the collection. And then when you go when you go up again, then there are the 3 first screening rooms. Actually, one is down. Also, that's our smallest. It's our former Parisien screening room, and then it's 64 seats, and then we have another 2 in the middle of the building, and those are 128 seats. And then when you go up, it's the biggest screening room, and it has 328 seats or so. So it gives us the opportunity to basically do every sort of program that we want. Because, for instance, we have the two middle screening rooms. One of them is what we call a black box, so we can take out the seats, and there we can do theater shows, or even present VR works, or have talks like this, or dance, or live music, anything basically. And in terms of projection, there's also anything possible. So we have of course, everything digital, DCPs, but also 35, 16, and even 70 millimeter in our biggest screening room. That's something that we really invested in along the way. It's not something that we started with, but by seeing what the filmmakers wanted, basically, looking at films of Tarantino and Chris Nolan, we saw that we had to invest in this format, and it really works very well. People love it; they see it as an extra, as a way of celebrating film culture.
So 4 totally different cinemas, and how does this fact that you have these 4 very different approaches to cinematic history also shapes the way of programming? So how do you decide where to set up a show or a series, curate these 4 very different cinemas in I?
Sorry, I wanted to point out that I forgot quite an important part of the building, which is our exhibition space, of course, because it's on the 2nd floor, and it's I think by heart it's 240 square meters, and it can be arranged for every different exhibition in a complete different style. But as far as the programming in the screening rooms and also outside, because like I said, we also do, we have a series called Extended, which is a VR presentation. Those don't need to be, of course, in the screening room. So the talks with the artists, they are in the screening rooms, but the works themselves are spread through the building. So what do we program? We found it very important as a film museum, in this theme, as a future cinemathek, to approach film not only as a sort of like a static given, or as a static, not a live art form. We wanted to take it seriously as an art form, so approach film as art of moving image, but also as a social document, and of course as cultural heritage. And we try to find connections in our programming all the time between the past and the present and the future, with new cinematic forms or new cinematic language. And then it really depends on how the show looks like, in what kind of screening room we program it. I mean, if it's if someone like I don't know, like any bigger film name, you know, if Celine Sciamma is coming over, then of course we will ask her to do a talk in the big screening room, but I think that counts for every theater. And if it's a multidisciplinary performance, then we will choose the Cinema 2 for it with the black box. Yeah.
Are there also artists who request to have their films or works being screened in a special cinema?
Yeah, we get that a lot. We get a lot of requests, actually. Maybe I would say a bit too much, because the upside of having success like we do is that it's well, I would say fairly easy for us to get funded because we're the only national film museum in the Netherlands, which is of course different situation here in Germany. So it has a advantage of being the only one in the sense that, like I say, it's easier for us to gather money, gather the attention, and get to do what we do. On the other hand, the problem, I would say, or the challenge, it's more positive, is that everyone wants to be part of it, and it's harder to be selective in your criteria and what to program, because you also need to be there for the industry. We are also there for the promotion of Dutch film internationally. We have a distribution channel. We have, of course, a huge archive with 55,000 titles. So there is a lot of requests, yes.
Maybe coming back to the architectural setup a little bit, I still remember how impressed I was when I first visited back in 2012 in the opening year, because part of the cinematic experience, at least to my impression, was that you already arrive by ferry, for example, when you come from Amsterdam South or from Central Station. So also the way of approaching, accessing the building is very special. And back then, in 2012, if I remember correctly, you were the only cinema being located in Amsterdam's north, beyond the Eye Canal. Has that changed in the meantime, and how does this also affect your programming?
So in the beginning, when we moved to the north of Amsterdam, because the Film Museum already exists for 75 years. This was actually this year is our 75th birthday. And it was located first in the Vondelpark, which is a central park in Amsterdam, and it was a beautiful, romantic old building. And it had 2 screening rooms, and it was completely different from what the Eye is now. So when we moved over to the north, a lot of people were actually skeptic, because we went to a part of Amsterdam which wasn't very attractive at all. Not to live there, not to go there, basically. It was socially, economically not attractive. But that changed.
It was also a former industrial site, wasn't it?
Exactly.
With the Shell Tower, and a lot of the buildings had been demolished.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that has changed drastically over the last 10 years. So there has been a lot of investment from the city. Expensive apartments, like everywhere over the world, I guess. It's a global problem. But it did make it like an attractive part of the city. And also there were cultural hubs. A lot of artists came to the north. There are schools, kitas, a lot of people living there now. So, and also other cultural centers. So there's one cultural center that is it is actually next to I. It's called the Tolhuistuin. And there's also live music from Paradiso. I'm not sure if you know that, but it's one of the our how do you say that? Like a pop podium, a venue, like a live music venue in the center. So they programmed the Tolhuistuin, so that also made a lot of people coming from the city, like the centers or the suburbs from the other side, come to the north. I'm just thinking what your question was.
The second part of the question was, you were back then the only cinema in Amsterdam's north. So has that changed in the meantime, and how did this affected the programming?
Yeah, so there has come another cinema. It's called FC Hyena. It's a great place. It's rather more like a student kind of theater. It's we could see that as a sort of competition in the way that they also show contemporary art house. But I would say that is the only overlap. I mean, we are so different in what we show. So it's not a real competition. They're rather a good collaborator for us, and we're happy that there is another, because it's really in another part of the north. It's not at the ferry side. So we think it's a good development that there are more cinemas in the north of Amsterdam.
I was also wondering a little bit about this aspect, the site, and especially the position within the city, being a little bit off-center from my perspective back then when it was first established at the beginning of the 2010s, and now with this aspiring part of Amsterdam city in the north. How would you describe the situation for the audience? From which parts of the city is the audience coming? Is there a neighborhood? Is there a public in the north? Or from which parts of the city is AI's public audience coming from? Which parts of Amsterdam are you also addressing with your program?
So we have a local audience, and that audience is, I would say, from from the city center, but also from the north, because the population now in the north has changed a lot. So when it comes to our contemporary art house, people will go to this cinema because, and also actually because we have, if I might be so modest, we have great screening rooms. So people really come to the eye to see in the best quality or have the nicest seats, or so that's also an added value. But every part of the city has its own art house theater, and there is a lot of overlap in the titles that we show also with us. So I mean, maybe we would not choose the new Coen Brothers, but you know, a little bit smaller art house we probably would if we think it's a good film. So it has changed in that sense, but if I look back to the beginning years, like the first years, for instance, we really tested, we had to test it out a little bit, what worked and what didn't work. And what we see now is that, I'm happy about it, is that, for instance, we tried, because we wanted to be the cinema in the north, as you say, for all the audiences. So we tried to screen also the commercial children films in the beginning, the first year. It didn't work at all. People just went to the commercial theaters, like we have the Pathé. So they actually traveled for almost an hour to go to the Pathé instead of going to AI for the same films. And we were actually kind of happy about it because we thought, okay, so it's already being done. It's not what people see us for. You know, they don't have this connotation with the film museum. And together with that fact, we also see that, for instance, classic films, also now after all these lockdowns, that these films were all sold out immediately. And let's say the more special programming. Yeah, so apparently what we're trying to tell the people, it works. It sort of corresponds with how the audience sees us, what we want to do.
Thank you so far. I'm sorry that we still have no connection to Gabor Heindl. We are still waiting for her and hope she will show up online. My next question would be to Angela Seidel. As being the director of the Cinemathek Leipzig, you are heading towards a new, unique place for audiovisual cultures in one of Germany's fastest changing cities. Could you please tell us a little bit, when did your fight for this new Cinemathek begin initially? What was your initial motivation, and what is the current state of the project? And of course, we're all very interested in what did you learn during your struggle?
That fact is really interesting also for us. I'm the director of the Cinemathek and sometimes called Master of Disaster in such meaning. It was a lot of ups and downs in this process. He is going on since the end of 2012. In this time we developed 3 big projects on different locations. 2 of them was crashed. That's currently we work on the 3rd variation of this. They were crashed because of different reasons. At first, the local government, we couldn't convict about our vision. and they have decided to give this first project, this house, at the market to reach other financial results. So I can say, okay. And the second time we developed with our partners, architectures, an industrial complex named Feinkost. It was a very special place, very interesting and also big. And this place was crashed because of the owners of this place, the Genossenschaft, called Genossenschaft. How can I say this in English? You know, Niels? Okay, Genossenschaft. It's a form of organization, heuristic person. And they decided don't go the way with us because of the responsibility for the whole area. Yes. And the third variation, yes, now is a place very near the main station of Leipzig, by the west side. It's a very interesting area because there's not houses or schools, or it is an industrial Brachland, genau, industrial area without life, yes. And the new developed district and the entrance to this new district, we could stay with a combination of an old house and a new building together. And we are the openers in this new area, yes. And the investors are very nice. They want to have win-win, yeah, but very nice to us and engaged, intense engaged by the state government for our project. And now the state government want to buy this part of area for our house. And yes, that's the state of project in city. In the whole time, in the time till now, we passed a lot of appointments, meetings, talks in different settings, and could convict the decision makers about this vision and idea, and could collect many partners and supporters and federate. Without they, the state of project was not the same like now, yes. Without they, we couldn't reach this target. Yes, and we could together collect money. Okay, we funded and together zusammen heißt zusammen, gesamt. Was heißt gesamt?
In total?
A total.
A total sum?
A total amount, a total. Okay. 23 million euro to realize the project. And the side effect of our engagement is that from this budget, from this fund, now can realize three other projects beside ours. And we have sent a strong impulse at the city society development of city, and yeah, this was a powerful, stressful, sometimes painful process and struggle to reach this target. Yes, but now it seems like it could be realized, could be the vision come true, and we are very happy about this. Yes.
That sounds great. So after 10 years of struggle, there's a real perspective to really open the cinema in Leipzig for Cinemathek, the new Cinemathek soon. What was your initial goal and how did it change over the years? So also regarding the place, but also programming, for example.
That's a complex question. I could talk so intense about programming because I'm not a programmer. I'm a master of disaster that could help to translate the ideas and could help to become reality and connect people together. And the project has changed over the time, yes. But the intention of this project was the same. We want try to show the expanded forms of discussing, presenting, contextualizing film content. We also want to focus the full educational Bedeutung, meaning and responsibility, educational dimension and responsibility of that contemporary important medium film. And that's why the vision was born and was depend on the structure of the locations. And it was different. The first location was a house, an old house, and with second, as with a few floors and upstairs situated little cinema, and we could connect this house with other practitioners, other filmmakers. They were rent the rooms with us together, and rooms we can meet each other. And the second project, there wasn't this possibility. It was an own complex where three screening rooms were situated in a big entrance hall and gastronomy and the for the staff, the rooms for the staff, but not more. It was a completely other point of view, yes. And now this project, and we have to change our concept. As a conception, we was looking for other wording for more and more convict the decision makers from the changed informations, yes. And there was many questions to us. What is that? What is that? What you want? And we need this really. And we need another cinema in Leipzig. Why? And this was not possible to explain the other context of our idea. Yes. And the third place. Yes. Now. Very central location, and there were also no rooms for other filmmakers to sit down or to rent. It's a room, a concept room for film to screen and to present and to exhibition and to discuss and to take part at the cultural life with film, and yes, I have to think about other informations, but that's was a big challenge for us the whole time. It was not clear where the way is going on. It was permanent changing.
And with the new place close to the central station in Leipzig, which kind of audience will you be addressing or also expecting for this new Cinemathek?
Yeah, this is our experiences in our currently place, NATO. is because of the programming that our target group is not only from the environment, from the directly environment. Our audience come from the whole town and looking for the content, yes, and for the themes that we are setting there. And we are also worked with other institutions, partners, and compile and develop and create film series and projects and special events, and that's why the people are coming. And because of our intention to make what we make, to make what we make. Yes, I think, and that's an profile, our special profile. That's why the people are coming, and in the own house when it will be realized and bald, coming soon. Would be not regional, also over the region from the middle of East Germany, and the international guests for festivals and special events. And yes, it's not an how can I say Kiez area,
so not
a special
area, only one area of Leipzig, so you're addressing the whole city.
We are not a cinema for one area of Leipzig. We are generally works.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the audience so far? Also from the online audience following us on the YouTube live screen?
Could I maybe add something?
Yeah, sure.
Because when Angela was talking, I just talked about the local audience. And as you were saying, it's not just a part of the city. And I just wanted to add for that, of course, it's not only a local audience, but it's also a national audience and an international audience. And for all these different audiences, you set up different kinds of programming. So, for instance, the exhibitions really have an international profile. Also, some of our thematical or bigger summer programs, like huge retrospectives, for instance. But when it comes to the local audience, one of the things that we do, and it might be, I'm not sure if it's possible for Leipzig, but one thing that really works for us is the fact that we have, in those 4 screening rooms, we have 5 films per room per day. So it's 20 films a day, and in every time slot, almost diagonal, we try to insert different kinds of special programs. So, for instance, if you come at 11, there you can see in the eye, you can see a classic film, but you can also see a new film. And the same goes for 1 o'clock and for 3 o'clock, and then in the evening. And then when we do the contextualization that you also just talked about, it's mostly always in the night because people are able to come over, and it's also an investment, of course.
Wow, that sounds quite impressive. 20 shows a day. Now I'm just curious, how many people from the staff in your team program these 20 shows? So that sounds like a lot of work to do.
It is, yeah. But we have a big team. We have the programming team consists of 10 people in total, of which 6 are, as we call, project programmers. So these are the people who make the thematical programs or the retrospectives or the specials, special events. And then we have, 1.5, which sounds a bit weird, but one person who does the first run titles. So he's the person who goes to all the festivals to see what's happening. And he is also the one who does the practical programming every week. So he's in contact with all the distributors. And I said 1.5 because there's another person who also does the thematical programming who's involved in that. So yeah.
You've already mentioned before the Special Collections Center that you also have in Amsterdam's north, also with a new building, and this impressive collection with a vast amount of titles from the whole history of film. How does this collection enter your program, and are there regular series, for example, or special events? And also, I would be wondering. I was wondering before our talk. Could you please tell us a little bit about the interconnections between the exhibitions that take place at I, special exhibitions, permanent exhibition, and the programming in the cinemas?
Okay, so about the archive, so we have this fantastic source of films and also film-related items, like, for instance, sheet music or photographs, or. But the it's not that we can show all these 55,000 films because we don't own the rights for all of this. I think there is about 10% of this whole collection that we own the rights of. So that means that one of the people in my team also is called a print coordinator, which is a very important job, basically, to be able to do all these programs. Because, for instance, when we have we just did a big film noir program, which consisted of 40 different titles. This person is the one who searches all over the world in different cinematheques and sales agents to be able to clear those rights, and also to arrange the copies, whether these are 35 or restorations or digital restorations on DCP. And of course, I mean, we try to use our collection as much as possible. It's like our, let's say, our raison d'être. And it is a fantastic collection. I mean, for instance, we have a beautiful silent film collection, sub-collection part. It's very internationally, very international collection because especially those first years, a lot of it is from France, Germany. So in that sense, we try to use it as much as possible, but it doesn't restrict us to use just our collection because we really want to be able to show, to approach those programs from a more conceptual point of view, or what we find the most interesting concept, basically. So it means, like I said, that we search all over the world also for other, and have contact, a lot of contact with other cinematheques and sales agents and distributors. What we do in our program, we have different series. We have, I mean, that's a big part of our programming, is the, as we call it, a horizontal programming. So we have different series also for, I would say, different audiences. For instance, we have our Eye on Art series. That's also a bridge to your later question about how we connect to the exhibitions. So what we do in the Eye on Art program is that every second and fourth Tuesday of the month, we have an evening, a program in which we relate cinema to other arts. So this could be a collaboration with other museums, or we could use, or we could show material from our collection, like Richter, for instance, and then have a talk about it. Or we could collaborate with different festivals that are in-house at that moment, but it's always related to the other arts, so it's a multidisciplinary kind of evening with a lot of context, a lot of live music, performances, dance, even poetry. And there is this same audience, I would say, like a very, what's the word, trouw, like, well, recurring audience. Those people really love these kind of programs, so they always come back on this Tuesday. And then we have a series which is called Cine Mini. It's for our youngest audience. It's 2+, and we have that every Sunday morning. And it's also a compilation of our collection, mostly with animations, clay animations, for instance. And it lasts about 20 minutes or so for an audience of 2+. Of course, it can't last too long. And then parents are obviously with them, and then we have this, it's in our smallest screening room where there's also room to play, and the lights aren't dimmed as at the other programs. So that's the way how we try to approach for all the different audiences, the different programs. We have about 10 series, so I'm not sure if I have to. I would probably recommend to see our website for everything that we do.
Are there any comments or questions so far from the audience? Anything you want to ask? Yeah, just give us a second. The mic is coming to you.
I have a question to Mila. I'm quite impressed that you have 20 screenings a day. And as I work also for the Kinemathek Hamburg as a programmer, I have two questions. How many spectators do you have the whole day in the middle? And how do you get financed all these 20 screenings a day for the film licenses? How do you manage it with your budget?
Okay, so I don't know how many visitors there are during one day, but I do know that the paying visitors in a normal year, outside of Corona situations, is for and film and exhibitions is 700,000 a year. We have more than 1 million visitors during the whole year, but then there are a lot of people also who visit the restaurant, for instance. So the people who buy a ticket, 700,000 approximately. It really depends on, I mean, the best screenings, of course, are during the evenings or in the weekends. I'm not sure if this answers your question, but of course we in the way we program, we obviously think about which films do we put in the morning. I mean, not only in terms of what kind of film is it a slasher horror movie, then we won't screen it at 11, for instance. But also, was it an expensive film? Did we, for instance, especially Japanese films, for instance, those rights are mostly very high, high prices. So these films we would rather screen also in the evening or in the weekends. In terms of budget, we work with 2 different budgets. So we work with a budget for our project programming. So these are all these thematical programs and retrospectives. And that is around 300,000 euros a year. And then we have another budget, which is for our first run titles, because it is a different financial construction, because the more visitors you have, the more you pay to the distributor. So that's like like a different budget for that. So it depends on, I mean, the how high the budget is every year depends on how busy the screenings were.
Did that answer your question? Okay. Other questions or comments from the audience here in Cinema 3 at Cinemax, or also online questions? I'm sorry that we still have no connection to Gabo Heindl, but maybe she will finally drop by during the last minutes. Well, a question I would like to ask to both of you, Angela and Mila, is how difficult or how easy is it to get in touch with a diverse audience? So, Angela, you've already addressed the questions. The question that you are addressing the whole city in general, the whole town of Leipzig, and not focusing on special areas. But I'm asking the question, of course, having in mind the ZAK concept and the idea of creating a new space, a new place, and lowering the boundaries to get easier access for audience who are not that present until now in cinemas, and especially in cinematheques. So how easy or how difficult is it to get in touch?
this is not easy. It's a big challenge to reach new groups of guests. So it depends on different things. I think it begins to the barrierless website, for instance, and the barrierless entrance in the venue, and also this barrierless possibility to perception the content and the venue and the guests, and to find out the right room with a simple guide system, and we have to communicate with other institutions. We have to enhance our networking, and we want to work at digital forms, but only as an Ergänzung, wie kann man sagen, beside the showing screen films in the screening room, but this is a hybrid concept, for example, and we have set the right themes for people, and then we hope they were coming. We have to invite the people, and they have to feel that we want to reach them, so that it's a high authenticity of being and programming, and create the location. So it's the first idea. Yes.
Could you maybe describe us your audience a little bit more? So, for example, what is the age structure, or are there special groups that are quite present in the audience? Maybe more present than others?
Yes, that's an interesting fact, and we are very glad to this fact that our audience is at the half, not till the age of under 30. The half of our audience is under 30 years old. Very young people, especially students and political engaged people, and this is a very positive fact for us, and they come to us because of our special programming, our special themes, and we have reached ein Vertrauen. Moment, oh Gott, ist dieses Wort weg? Vertrauen? Trust. We have to get trust in our work, and that's very fine for us, and strength our kind to work. Yes, that's very fine.
That's really interesting, especially when we're thinking of the Cinemathek of the future and which audiences should be addressed, and especially the age structure of cinema goers. I would also like to address the question to you. How is it at I?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about inclusion and diversity in the cultural sector, and what I can mean for this, in what ways we could change in this. And it's such a broad question, because it is about it is about so many different levels, I would say. But maybe first the more practical things that we changed or are changing. For instance, when you talk about accessibility, it's very important. People have to feel home, and they actually literally need to be able to access all the places in the building. So, for instance, people in a wheelchair need to be able to access all the places. And that's also interesting if Gabo would have been here, because architecture, these are also architectural choices that you make, and it sounds very obvious, but it doesn't happen always everywhere. Another thing is that we offer most Dutch films with English subtitles also. And we're also working with different systems like ear catch and subcatch. And blind people are able to hear what is happening, and for deaf people, the other way around. So, but it's very, this is also dependent on the distributors, because they have to supply these elements to the film to be able for us to show it or to use it. So it's like a change in the whole industry, I would say. It's not just one cinema or a museum, of course. And then far more looking, let's say, into the future, or more in general speaking, if you say diverse, I mean, I think a museum should be there for a future generations, and they grow up in such a fundamentally changing world, not only in how we relate to nature or climate, for instance, or how they grow up in a digital world. Social interactions are completely different from, let's say, my generations or before, or subjects like inclusion or equality are completely different for these younger generations. They are far more like a topic, this search for identity and be able to be who you want to be. I think the only way to change that is to change your organization from within, and that's a very difficult one, because it's a structure, I think, is probably recognizable for people in the cultural field here, but we live in this transition period of a lot of freelancers who cannot get contracts, but these are the younger people, not only, of course, but most young people can't get like assignments, or not assignments, but contracts in a company. And then on the other hand, you have the group of people who are working at the institution, who have a lot of knowledge, who are very professional, of course, have their own specialisms. So in my view, you don't want to replace these people with young people, but there should be a way of more interaction between those two groups. So a thing that we just started, actually, and I'm very happy that we got the funding for that, because also it was a hard work to get that part, at least, is for a program or a project that we are starting next year, which is called Programmers of the Future. So what we're trying to do with that is to put up a curriculum, or like a traineeship for a year. And now we got the funding for the upcoming 3 years. So for 1 year, we would train 3 people, and then the next year, another 3, and then the third year, another 3, where the most important goal is to, on the one hand, exchange the expertise on this hybrid programming that we do, and all the huge network in all these different industries that I has, to give that to the younger audience, and on the other hand, to get back from this, or younger generation, sorry, to get back from those people new perspectives, basically, and a new way of looking at the world that I think is very hard for us to see now yet. So we hope to start with that next year.
Also, a question that comes up when talking about accessibility is, of course, the question of how much money one can spend going to a cinema or a film museum, a cinemathek. So, if I may ask so directly, how expensive is going to the eye for a show, for a screening, and how expensive should it be?
I think our regular tickets are conform the market, so to speak. So people pay the same in a commercial theater as in I for the film screenings, or in other art houses. But when it comes to, for instance, having a cup of coffee, or especially having dinner, I would say it's targeted for a more well-off audience. It's in that sense. So we talked, of course, about this yesterday. Also, it's if you want to be a more inclusive place for people, then programming, just changing your programming won't do. It has to be the whole package that has to change, and it's like I also said in the beginning, it really is a challenge to be there for everyone and still trying to hold on to a specific artistic profile also. And of course, we're publicly funded. We are the only film museum, like I said, so we need to be accessible for everyone. And yeah, so but for instance, the prices of dinner or like a sandwich or a coffee, that is something that we talk about, how we could adjust to that. But what we also have, for instance, is we work with the city with this special pass that people can have who are under a minimum of income monthly that they can use not only in I but also in the other theaters or museums, and they can attend the screenings for I think $250 or so.
And there's also this Dutch project called Cineville Pass. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What is it, and how does it work?
Okay, well, I'm not from Cineville, of course, but I'll tell you what I know. What is interesting about Cineville is that it actually started, it was started by a few friends of mine, because we all worked in the same student theater in Amsterdam, which is called Criterion. It's a great place. If you have the time, please go visit. It's run by students. And two of those students thought of, we had a lot of discussions there when we were studying about why is it so, it is too expensive basically if you want to see 10 films a month. There are people who are so much, thankfully, are so cinephile, love film that much that they want to visit, and they have the time, of course. As students, you have more time. So maybe that is also changing, by the way, but when I was studying, there was still a lot of time. So these two people, they started this company, and basically the Cineville Pass is like a membership with which you can visit all the art house theaters in Amsterdam and Rotterdam and a few other cities. So
it's like a flat rate for cinephiles.
Exactly. It's like, I think it's $17.50 or so a month. And with this membership, you can see as many films as you like.
And how does it work at I? So is there a special reserved seats for every show for Cineville Pass members, or how does it affect your ticket sales?
I must say that about the reservations, I don't really know how that works. But it is a huge part of our audience. It's like at some screenings, it's like 40 or 50% of the people are from Cineville. And it was kind of difficult with the lockdown, after the lockdown with the like the regulations, because of course then we had placed seating. So that was difficult a bit with Cineville. But on the other hand, we of course wanted to welcome the Cinevillers even more, because they kept on paying this monthly while they could not see any films. But in a regular situation, it's a huge part of our audience, and it's not just at it's like in all these art houses. It works really well. And I remember when they were setting it up, it was kind of a difficult task for them, because they had to convince all the distributors and all the exhibitors that they actually had to invest a little bit in order to get back a bigger audience for that. But they pulled it off.
And coming back to Leipzig and the new Cinemathek, do you have something like Cineville Pass, a membership for a cinephile audience, maybe with a lower budget in mind, in vision?
Yeah, that's a fact we don't think about it so intense till now. because of the struggle and difficulties about the whole process of realize this project, yes. But we know that we have to develop new ways of distribution and sell the tickets and hold the people in our house, and that's the way, like an abonnement or something like that is as a first step to think about it. And such a Cineville Pass is also an interesting idea, and we have to think about it, yeah. But we don't at the end of this process. But we know that we have to reformed and changed this kind of finance, the cinema or the theater. But we have also a big plus because we are financed about the state government and the local government in Leipzig, that we have a real strong base to work every year, and that's very fine. And I think the responsibility for all filmmakers, institutions, cinemas is to find a way we can make together this transformation of the whole theme: film, theaters, distribution, responsibility, education, all that. This is a very complex thing, we think, and we can take part of this process and can connect each other over the world, first at Europe, perhaps, and find these concepts together, yes.
So, last chance for your questions or comments. There's one.
I also wanted to cut in for a sec to tell you a little bit more about Gabu Heindl. We now have some information. Her plane was delayed, so she's stuck in her COVID testing and airplane regulations. So we're very sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you for this additional information. Sorry for that. Maybe as Gabu won't show up on the panel, I can just hint you to her great work, which is really worth mentioning. And the recent book I want your point towards. She just published last year a book called Stadtkonflikte, Radikale Demokratie in Architektur und Stadtplanung. So a book that was published by Mandelbaum and raises the question, what is democratically committed architecture? And Gabu worked as an architect and urbanist, designed the very famous face and entrance situation, so to speak, of popular film institutions like the Austrian Film Museum and the Stadtkino im Künstlerhaus, both located in Vienna. Maybe you can check that out in addition to our panel, as Gabu won't show up today. I would like to ask both of you a final question to wrap up our discussion, if there's nothing from the audience. Okay, so my final question to both of you, Mila and Angela, would be, as we were talking about ideas for the Cinemathek of the future, if you were to build the new Cinemathek of the future for Hamburg, what would be a key element you would like to have included as an essential feature at any means with your experience?
I think about that, how can I explain, then many things, important things, in my opinion, can I read in your concept, yes, and it is compared to our intentions, and it's, I think it is not the same, ähnlich, wie kann man sagen?
Similar?
Similar, yes, similar. And for us, I think, or for me, I think it's a very important thing that the place will be taken by the audience, by themselves, and we give them the chance to do this with us. It is a collaborative working platform with based on networking and the intention to develop competence in seeing and understanding film, and this his connections to the other forms of arts and the whole social life. And that's for us the important thing. And I think it's it's special from city to city, or also there would be a different. But Leipzig is not in Hamburg, and it is depend on the location. Where is it? And that's why I can say I have many things read in your concept, and for us it is the accessibility of the audience and the consequent programming of content and open-minded kind of presenting. I can't explain in a better way. I try my best, but if here is a person they can help me to explain it better, let's do.
I think it's very similar to what you're saying. I think what I read in the plan for ZAK is very much of what I see happening in I. I would say that the network, that the meaning of a place, it becomes valuable for people to come there and to interact when it's really connected with all these different parties in a city, cultural but also non-cultural partners, and with one goal, I would say, and that is to keep the film culture alive and to treat it as the beautiful form of art, which it is.
That sounds like an ideal closing word for our discussion today. Thank you so much for your participation, Angela Seidel and Mila Schlingemann. I was really inspired by your experience from your both very different and very interesting institutions. I hope you also enjoyed being here today with us, both on and offline. And just to close, I thank you all for your participation, of course, and I wish you a wonderful additional experience here with further talks, discussions, and of course screenings at the 29th edition of Filmfest Hamburg. And Jule will provide you with the handout of the ZAK concept. I hope we meet again soon and see how the project will develop. Thank you all for coming and for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.